All right, welcome in. As promised, Mirin Fader is here with us. Perfect timing right off game one of Hawks Bucks as we continue to see where this Giannis Antetokounmpo run is going to go. Mirin just wrote the biography of Giannis Antetokounmpo, the first that we'll see of his legendary career here. And that's what I'm going to stress throughout this. Like with stars in the NBA now, we've become so over like critical of them and are they going to win a ring, are they going to get it done, are they going to break through, that you almost lose sight of the other achievements, the defensive players of the year runs that he's had, the MVPs that he's piled up at this point. But the disappointing playoff runs have been kind of the theme of his career so far. So you really do hope that he can break through here and get his flowers per se by finally winning that chip. There are so many interesting things about Giannis that I want to get into here today, but we'll start with your journey to this point, your writing career. I think you've told your story well in a bunch of different places, but so I'll kind of have you do the quick summary here of, going to a small school, playing basketball when you were young, taking on this profile approach that you do, the personalities, the life, the, relationships, all the different like background things about these people that you write about in the basketball world. I love the way you do it. It's unique. It's different. It's refreshing. And what ultimately, after all of these profiles, all these different athletes that you've written about here, led you to say, all right, I'm going to write the book about Giannis?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that. I think, with long form stories, you always want like something very human oriented. It's got to be more than just like, oh, so and so is really good at basketball or really good at football or, whatever sport that I'm covering. And Giannis, of course, I just feel like there's so much missing between, really tough childhood and NBA MVP. So it's just kind of like, why do we really know nothing? And so for me, it came out of a profile I did on Giannis and his youngest brother, Alex, for Bleacher Report, where I previously worked. And I just observed the chemistry between both of them, being at Giannis's house. And I just thought, okay, this is a book, and so with long forms, my stories, you have to stop at like 4,000 words, but a book is like 100,000 plus words. So it was perfect to like have the time and the space to talk about those things.
So what was that process like? Because this is something I'm trying to do too, is get from writing, those short articles off like news, games, like little things into longer pieces. You talk about 4,000 words there, and then eventually get into 100,000 page book. How do you start to write longer and, go further and stretch these stories out the way you do?
Yeah, I mean, I started out at a newspaper, the Orange County Register, and they would like cap me at like 800 words. Like writing 1,000 was like very exciting, It's just like, oh my God. And then if we get to like 1,200, it's like, whoa, 1,200, So I think it's just accepting that like it takes a long time to be able to do the work that you want to do. I was doing that for like 4 years, Mm-hmm. And it was hard because I felt like they cut the soul out of each piece and I wanted to continue on. So I just started pitching. And I think I mentioned this to you the other day. I was, you just got to pitch to people and say like, this person deserves a longer story. I'd like to write on this person. And freelancing is kind of how I started. I would freelance in my spare time for ESPN and Bleacher Report, SB Nation, a lot of places. And then finally I got picked up by Bleacher Report. So, but it was a long time as a freelancer,
What was that first story where you broke through that 800 word mark there? What was like the first one where you really got to go long on someone?
It was interesting. Cal State Fullerton was one of my beats, and they're really known for baseball. They're like this small market program that always goes to the College World Series. And but nobody was covering their softball team. And this new coach comes in and she's trying to take over the program. And so I did this long form on the softball coach. And they were terrible that year, but in like 6 years, they became conference champions. And I went back and she had the article like framed on her inner office. And I was just like, stunned, so it felt really good to get a longer story there.
So when did you finally start covering Giannis with this story here on Bleacher Report and started reporting on him for the first time? It's interesting. I never really heard about Alex. You hear about the Nazis and Costas and the NBA guys here, but his younger brother is sort of who you profiled here.
Yeah, so that was 2019 around like the summer, like June, July. And my editor was like, you should look at Giannis's youngest brother, Alex, because like Alex was really good at the time. And he kind of did all the stuff that, you know, Giannis does. Like they're very similar in game. And I think Alex even has a bigger wingspan, allegedly, even in high school. And so, yeah, I spent the day with them in, I think it was June 2019. And I don't know, I was just really taken by them. It stuck with me, you know, some stories just like really stick with you. And the story came out later that summer, and you know, people were just like, I've never seen that side of Giannis. It was like a more vulnerable side of Giannis, or getting into his head a bit, because, you know, people really only talk about Giannis at the time just in terms of like his physicality. You know, oh my God, he's such a freak on the court. Like the missing was like, who is he in terms of like being nurturing or all of these other qualities? And so I felt like the piece did that. So concurrently, I had been trying to write a book for a very long time, maybe like 5 years. And I finally got introduced to the right literary agent who was interested in representing me. And a couple of the stories I pitched like didn't work out. But when this came out, he was like, I think this is the thing. So I wrote the proposal later that year. And then it was like shopped around to different publishing houses early 2020. I signed the deal March 2020 when the world shut down. And then I had from March 2020 to March 2021 to do the book, which is insane. Usually you get 2 years. I got 1 year.
So you had that background reporting from 2019, but when the world shut down, it becomes a little bit tougher, I'm sure, to get the kind of like access and interviews and visuals there that you would want. You know, it was really the easiest time to get an interview with someone because you could just hop on the computer there and do it. But at the same time, you couldn't be in all the places you wanted to, I'm sure.
Well, it was crazy because even before I signed the deal, I was just like, I need to go to Milwaukee, just because I was like nervous. It's my first book. So I actually went to Milwaukee right before the shutdown, like literally a week before Corona shut down in the US. And I got the brothers again, and I got the family again. So that was like very, very lucky that happened. And then I went to Sacramento because the Pistons were playing the Kings, and a lot of former teammates were on the Pistons at the time. So I got a bunch of people there, and then I came home, and then they shut down all US travel. So I was very, very lucky, but it was still really hard because I wanted to go to Greece and I couldn't go to Greece, obviously. So yeah, WhatsApp became my best friend. I was up interviewing people in Greece at like 6 a.m. my time, Pacific. And, you know, it would be nighttime there. And I got through the pandemic just reporting 24/7.
Did you need any Greek translators along the way?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I got to know a Greek translator very well. And this person like really helped me out, not just in terms of like interviewing people, but you're working with like secondary source material, like trying to find all the articles ever written about Giannis in Greek. And like, I definitely got help from people for sure. But, you know, there just wasn't that many because he wasn't destined for success. You know, he was like in this awful league and nobody really thought twice about him. He was kind of an afterthought. And so it's very interesting to find, you know, the 10 articles ever written about him back then, which is like insane, you know?
It's unbelievable because this story of him, it really has a little bit of everything. There's like nationality, identity, poverty, just all these different stories of life, and really the way the game has gone international at this point that I think this reflects too. You just read some of the stories of his come up there, and you know, like there's just so many little tidbits. The fact that he had to change his name from Antetokounmpo to Antetokounmpo to match with like, you know, the Greek society there, but like even all those little things, his basketball interests and, you know, their, you know, push to work hard there and all these different things really didn't break through and have them become accepted there. And really, like one of my favorite basketball stories I've ever read was that New York Times piece about how all right, now he's this MVP being celebrated in Greece and the Greek Freak and all this different stuff, playing for the national team. But when he was there, he wasn't able to become a citizen. He wasn't able to, his family wasn't able to get the civil service jobs. He didn't become a citizen until a couple of years before he went to the NBA draft. And
Right.
they just had to fight so hard to belong there in Greece.
They had to fight so hard to belong there, and also that there's just so much revisionist history about how people felt back then versus now. And one of the parts of the book that I enjoyed reporting was finding his childhood best friends, and there were a couple that were also Black Greek and undocumented, and sort of charting their careers and non-careers and just how they weren't able to ascend in the way that he was because they didn't get their papers expedited. They weren't 6'9" at the time. And so looking at the way that his friends' lives really diverged really gives you perspective on how lucky Giannis got and how improbable it was, and how quite sad it is for everyone else who is Black and Greek and can't get basic, rights in life. So I just thought it was interesting to kind of use them as a way to learn more about like all the, the obstacles that Giannis had, because it really wasn't going to happen. I think that's what people don't understand, is that he was one event away from not making it. It was always like one thing away from not making it. It was never destined. It was never like supposed to happen.
What was the turning point you think that led him to break through and do what was so unlikely there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a couple things. First of all, like the NBA does its homework. Like these scouters are not going to Greece to find talent. They've identified him as talent. Now it's just how good can he be? So I think first of all, like credit to the whole international scouting community that just sees these people, even though you don't know what they're going to turn into.
Even in like those lower leagues in Greece.
Right. It's like actually insane. And so, credit to them. But I think as far as like the other things that allowed him to break through, it was a perfect storm getting drafted to an awful team where everything goes wrong. Everyone gets injured. They won 15 games. And he just luckily gets into the lineup because they're so bad. And so what if he gets drafted to another team where he doesn't get to play and develop? Would he become Giannis? I don't know. Like, I think it was a perfect storm, like, being in a small market environment where they actually cared about him and was there for him and supported him and allowed him to play through his mistakes. Like that I think that allowed the breakthrough, because I don't know if that would have happened with another team. They want you to, when you get drafted, you need to be ready. Like this idea of development is really like a far gone concept.
Yeah, no, it was stunning. I still remember the day he got drafted, and it was like, could this guy be like way later in the draft? Could he be up at the top? And he ultimately landed somewhere in the middle there, and the Bucks took a chance on him. Of course, like here in Boston, it's still like, oh, the Celtics could have got him. They drafted Kelly Olynyk over him. And at that time, like no one would have been waving a flag to draft Giannis. It would have been seen as like such a massive gamble.
Totally. Okay, so one of my favorite anecdotes from the book, I talked to Austin Ainge, and he was telling me how like they so like basically Danny, Austin, and like a bunch of Boston people not only came to Greece, but they traveled to this place called Volos, which is like, like 6 hours away or something crazy like that. And the crowd was like yelling at Danny and like saying mean things, and he's just like so confused, like why are these people, like why is everybody saying these things to me? And he doesn't know what they're saying because he doesn't know Greek. And then finally somebody tells him that they're taunting him and because they've mistaken him for a rival Greek GM. They don't know that he's Danny Ainge, but once they realize he's Danny Ainge, they start cursing and saying things about the Lakers, and it's, and then they all start cracking up, and it's hilarious. Imagine like this, little gym in the middle of nowhere, and Danny Ainge is getting like shitted on by all the people there. And it's just like very funny. And then they come to a practice the next day, which was just like all the players were like, oh my God, Danny Ainge came to our practice, and it's just a huge deal. But what they basically said was like, if we knew Giannis would have grown 2 inches, it would have been a different story. He would not have fallen to where he fell at all.
What made the Bucks believe? Like, what, there were all these different concerns about him and questions, and you could project greatness there. But what made, whereas I think it was 15 teams passed on him before that. What made the Bucks commit to him in the end, you think?
So that's the weird part, is that, like, especially talking to people like John Hammond, the GM at the time, and a lot of the staffers, is that they were fully aware that they were taking a ginormous chance. Like, this wasn't something that they, like, John is like, I'm not going to act like I knew something that others didn't. Like, I'm not going to act like I have these clairvoyant powers and I knew. So I think first just saying that is like, they took a humongous swing. But you can do that when you're the Milwaukee Bucks, and you had to do that when you're the Milwaukee Bucks, because keep in mind that, they were almost going to leave Milwaukee. There was concerns about, like, could their arena be a modern day NBA arena? Could they leave? Look what happened to Seattle. So they were in this position where they could afford to take a chance. And it's not like you were top 5. You could, if this didn't work out, it would be okay. 15 is a whole lot different. And so I think a couple of those things made them feel comfortable, but they liked what they saw of him. Scouting him was incredibly difficult. They couldn't tell the size of the players on the court because the film quality was so terrible. So imagine, like, everything is against this guy. You can't even tell if he's that good via film, but you're just taking a chance. And so it was a big chance, but, credit to them for actually doing it,
I remember I was covering Syracuse, and they took like a summer trip to Greece, and I was trying to find like these Facebook streams to watch them, and it was just someone with like a handheld recorder, like 15 rows back, like trying to find the ball and who's who there. It is crazy, some of the film work that the scouts there have to work with and go off it. So who were some of the most interesting, or what were some of the most interesting interviews you did writing this book? Like, what were some highlight moments, quotes, people that you talked to through this process?
Yeah, I think, okay, so I interviewed 221 people, so there were a lot of interviews, but I guess breaking them up into like sections. The childhood best friends were amazing, and he's still close with some of them. I think that I kind of just I knew how hard things were for Giannis, but I didn't know how vulnerable he was and how emotional he was, and how, he used to cry after games, or just feeling so low and sad and not knowing what was going to happen. I think the childhood friends like really illuminated that for me. And then talking with Josh Oppenheimer, who's a current assistant coach with the Bucks, I really loved talking with him because he was their rookie year and they were so tight. Like, that's his guy. And I think that, I'm not sure if this is the exact quote, but I know it's in the beginning of the book. And Josh said, like, Giannis works as hard as he does now because he's afraid of losing everything. So I think that, like, that's his mindset.
There's my dog.
Okay, I got to know the dog's name.
Sophia.
Oh,
I knew she was going to make an appearance one day on this show.
so cute.
She's dying to go enjoy the sun, so we'll wrap this up, Evan. But I still have a ton of more questions here on Giannis. That childhood, I think you described like them sleeping together and just like the, tiny living space that they were in, and the difficulty to survive day in, day out. I think Thanasis had to, go out and steal some things, and his parents were always looking for jobs, and Giannis was doing what he could to just put food on the table. And there's an interesting anecdote about one of his coaches saying that, like, he's got this great basketball potential and we can do all these different things to, fulfill that. But today he's got to eat, like, well, yeah. What was that experience growing up for people that don't know it?
Well, Giannis didn't want people to feel sorry for him. So he never said to his teammates, like, hey, we're struggling. There was one incident, which is a pretty big moment in the early chapters of, he just didn't eat anything the whole day and he fainted on the court. And that's when everybody was like, oh my gosh, like, you have to start eating. And he just never wanted anyone to feel sorry for him. So he's, and they're also not the type of people that want to burden anyone or ask too much. And so out of the kindness of the teammates' hearts, they helped in the way that they could, but they weren't rich either. So it wasn't easy for them too. But yeah, I think it was really hard for Giannis to develop his basketball skills as well, because there were stretches of time where he'd just have to leave with his family to go sell trinkets to make money. So he'd be gone like 2 weeks and then come back for a couple practice and then leave for a month and then come back. And so it was just like very unstable. And this is when he's like 15, 16 years old. And finally, the coaches get him to stay. So again, it's like, a prospect that isn't fully on the court 24/7 at age 16, and that is like extremely rare,
Did you get to interview Giannis for this?
I interviewed him for the story that I did, which this was born out of. Mm-hmm. So this book has that interview in it.
I do find that interesting because most of the time when you're writing a book, and I know you did get him for that story, but you don't really, I talked to Jeff about this a lot too, Jeff Perlman, like you don't get the subject himself. And it feels like that's almost fine because like, that prospect of it, did you want to like do a full interview with him for the book itself and like the full story here? Because it almost seems like that's too big of a interview to have here. Like you can get like everybody in the world around him, and that almost does like a better job of writing the book than having to like come to Giannis and be like, all right, I'm writing your biography, and like have that discussion and like everything that comes with that. Because a lot of times it feels like subjects are almost like unreceptive to someone else writing their biography, especially now where everyone wants to write their own documentary and produce all the own content about themselves and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of subjects want to get paid, but that isn't, that's not journalism. Like you can't pay your subjects. So there's a lot of like as told to by, which is not, the work that I want to do right now. I want to do like real journalism, but the interview we had was great. And, it really, it colors the book. There's a lot in there from him. So I felt good about that. And then I interviewed the family multiple times. So like I mentioned that trip to Milwaukee. So I think just spending a lot of time with the brothers, because they're so close to him. So I felt like those interviews like really were illuminating as well. So of course I wanted more, like every writer wants more time, but all things considered, I felt really good. I mean, nobody else has interviewed the mom, and she's in there. So, I just, and I felt like, I don't know, it just gave me the latitude to explore things. Like, I don't know how much of, the racism he experienced, they might choose to put in if they were doing an as told to by story, so, sometimes you have more freedom.
What was some of that racism, explicit, implicit, that he had to go through there?
Yeah, I mean, so it really wouldn't happen when they had home games, but when they would travel to different places, that's when people would shout like really obscene things from the stands and just horrible. And then even when they just walk on the street, like people would say things. And so there was also this like neo-Nazi group that was around Greece at the time called Golden Dawn, and they would patrol these neighborhoods really like hunting for migrants, and they would beat them up. They would, there were murders. It's just really awful xenophobic group. And so, there were moments where Giannis was aware of them, or, so were the brothers, and, you couldn't walk home at night alone. You just always had to be aware. So even though there were like really, really kind, amazing white Greek people that helped out the family, there were also people that did not support them and were horrible. I think people think it's one or the other. It's both. There were amazing, selfless people that formed lifelong relationships with the family. And then there were just like truly awful racist people that didn't care that he was a basketball player. Like to them, he was Black and therefore not Greek because they don't offer citizenship, even if you're born there. And Giannis was born there.
How did his parents end up in Greece? They were from Nigeria, and, all the kids were born in Greece. What brought them from Nigeria to Greece?
Yeah, Nigeria was really unstable at that moment. Like the economy was in tatters. Oil was one of their biggest exports, and there was just so much instability there, and political instability, and they needed a new opportunity. And one of the reveals in the book is that they actually didn't intend to come to Greece. They were going to go to Germany. So they went to Germany first, and then Charles, the father, was going to play soccer, and then he had an injury that ended his career, and so they went to Greece from there. But Greece wasn't actually originally in the plans. So yeah, they were just looking for more opportunity, better opportunity, and I think Sapoli is an interesting place to have landed out of all the places in Greece because it's actually a very migrant-heavy neighborhood. So you had people from all different countries. It was really a melting pot.
Mm-hmm. And what are his parents like? I think we have a good sense of the brothers there because one plays for the Lakers and one's with them there in Milwaukee. People kind of know who they are, but what are his parents like?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I never met Charles because he had died before I did the story. But Veronica was like really, really nice, but also really cautious. She doesn't. Oh no. Oh my gosh.
Sorry, I just had to let her go. She was getting antsy.
That was so stressful. I was
I'll have you start that over.
What was it? Oh, Veronica. Okay, so because she was undocumented, and all these things, she couldn't really trust people, especially coming to the U.S. as well. So takes a little bit longer to warm up too. But she's very kind and just very supportive and just loves her children more than anything. And she is their role model. So they saw how much she sacrificed their entire lives, and so they wanted to repay her in any way they could. And from what I know about the dad, he was super, super selfless. And I know it sounds cliche, but like he always had a smile on his face, even when everything was awful. He would always just be walking around with a smile on his face and would always say, "How are you?" to friends. But he was gone working. The parents were both gone working like the whole day and sometimes night. So I think like I'm happy that Charles got to see Giannis turn into what he has, because it really changed things when they were able to come to America. They got denied at first with their visas, and that was really, really painful for Giannis' rookie year. So once the family came over, they were all able to just, I don't know, be a lot happier together.
What strikes you about the way Giannis has grown up here over the last 10 years that we've gotten to know him to some degree? Like, you spoke about him being this kind of caring figure in the family there. And, obviously when you saw him in 2013, he was this skinny guy. And now he kind of looks like a Greek god. He's just like chiseled and just overpowering people, huge head, just this staggering figure of dominance that wasn't always there. Like, I think physically, I get a good sense of how he's transformed over the last 8 years that he's been in the NBA here. But what about his personality, like him as a person, do you think he grew up the most in?
I mean, I think he's opened up more to teammates. He was like really private himself. He's always been a friendly, hilarious person, like very funny. Like every teammate that's ever played with him has at least 3 anecdotes up their sleeve of the funniest Giannis stuff, but he's just opened up more in terms of like a vulnerable way. And I think it was Sterling Brown who said this to me last year, as far as like on the court growth, Giannis like listens more to his teammates. He's always like a person that, even though obviously he's a good teammate, he works so hard. He believes he can will his team to victory, but now as a leader, he's learned to like listen to other people and lead in that way. And that comes with also being more vocal. So one of the things that he struggled with majorly was opening his mouth. And Jason Kidd was like, "I need you to talk." Jason Kidd was trying to make him into a point guard, and like talking is like breathing for point guards. And so, but Giannis hated that, like hated talking. And so that's one of the biggest things is like he's become a leader that leads not just by example, but, vocally as well.
So there's this sentiment against him that I don't know whether it's because he's not a great shooter or he hasn't won at this point, or he's just always doing the spin move. Like, I don't know what it is about like fans online and their, distaste for Giannis, because I love him. I really do. Like he's become one of my favorite players, not only because of the personality you talk about there, but I feel like people should love this approach he's taken where he doesn't want to team up with the other greats in the game. And I know he's got a couple of really good teammates there in Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton. But, he's not everyone always thought he was going to go to Miami or Dallas or one of these places with other stars, LA. But he signed that extension through some uncertainty there. And now he has said over the next 4 to 5 years, he's going to try to get it done largely on his own there. I think one of the interesting things about that is this thing that he doesn't work out with other stars during the off season. He's talked about wanting to do it on his own and beat the best in the game and this kind of thing. Where do you think that stems from for him? Is it kind of just him growing up in a different culture where that AAU thing wasn't as prevalent here? Or is it just kind of his loyalty to Milwaukee?
I think it's he thinks that, like, why would I give you my secrets? Like, why, if I'm trying to beat you on the court and kill you on the court, why would I give you a glimpse of my tendencies? It really comes from just a competitive aspect. And I think he's like very old school in that regard, like I think it was Josh Oppenheimer who said this quote about like Giannis is never going to be on the banana boat. And if he's on the banana boat, he's going to be with his brother.
His brothers.
Yeah. So when he said that to me, I was like, okay, I get it. And it's not that he's not friendly. He comes off as like not friendly, but he's really just competitive, and it just comes from a desire to not let you see. However, I think there's a limit. Like, he turned down Dirk's Hall of Fame shooting coach guy. That's a guy that you need to accept an invitation to, in my humble opinion. But he doesn't want to work with outside people. But, he's been really successful doing it his way also, I think, regardless of like the slander that we've seen. But I think the problem is like, had he not been named MVP, nobody would care. Like, they would just still find him adorable and endearing and inspiring. I think once he was named MVP and the pressure, that's when it became enormous. That's when he had different expectations. Might have been like one of the worst things, not worst things to happen to him, but it just created a different lens through which we view him.
Yeah, no, and it happens differently now for players. They come in at 18, 19, and especially a guy like him, he was just trying to find his way on that roster. Jabari Parker was the future of the franchise there when they were both getting started, and he had to fight to the top of the roster there. And unfortunately, Parker getting hurt the way he didn't help. And some other instability there, trying to find the right coach, all those different things. But really, we're just looking at 3 or 4 years now where he could have legitimately won the championship. So we're still kind of very early in his window. I was at Game 7, as I told you before we got on here. It was my favorite game I've ever gone to. The atmosphere was electric. I keep telling people that Nets crowd's underrated. And this countdown, or count up, I guess it was, on the free throws, just epic. Like, it was loud. It was a moment, especially after the last year where we didn't have crowds in stadiums, to have that effect there where you can probably imagine that's tough for him, going to the line, hearing that, getting that 10-second violation called on him in the past, and going through the process that he does there at the line. Like, that was just a moment that I'm never going to forget. And then him airballing the first one, but finishing the game, hitting 8 of 14 as he did, and winning the biggest game of his career. That was so much fun and really felt like a breakthrough moment. We'll see where it goes for him there. But that free throw routine with him, I've never seen anything like it. Like, the stare, like, I'm going to almost try to like imitate it. He does the big breath, the stare, the ball's right here, dribbles a couple times, rolls it in his hand. Everyone's counting up there at like 12 seconds at this point, goes way above his head, and then just flicks it up there. And like, there's some games where it works. Most of the time it doesn't. And that's still this thing he's trying to get past, is teams are willing to send him to the line. Like, his shot still at this point in his career isn't there 100% of the time.
I just got so stressed as you were recounting. This is what I feel every time I see the routine.
Oh, it's hard. It's hard to watch.
I just feel stress coursing through my body. It's just, it's not good. But that game was just so intense. I was screaming. I have not cared about a team in a very long time. I was just like, oh my God. But Chris Herring had at Sports Illustrated, he had a really good piece about this. And it wasn't just on the shooting, but he had one line in particular where he was saying that, you could tell Giannis is like thinking, because he knows if he drives and he gets fouled, he has to go to the free throw line, and that's not great. So he's mulling over all of these things in his mind instead of just doing it. I thought last night's game, much better job of that, but still like that play where Trae Young was guarding him and he chooses to do a fadeaway instead of just, where's the hook? Where's the, it's almost like not understanding how big and powerful he is. Or I don't even think it's that. I think he's just insanely coachable and he's been misguided his entire career. They've been trying to make him into a guard, a perimeter person when he should really be a 5. And I think that's like more of an off-season discussion. Like, is he going to fully go into that like AD, or is he going to, keep trying to run the floor? So I think that there's just, it's like a conversation that's been going and going and going, and you're just seeing the problems with it all.
What's that shooting evolution been like for him? Because it's gotten better. He can knock down a 3 at this point. It's almost, he's kind of lucky. Like, I was watching that game and I was like, is this how he's going to go down? Is this going to be like the latest loss for him, just being unable to hit a free throw and the air balls? And like, I was dreading that conversation with him, but he broke through. And then to some degree too, what we're watching with Ben Simmons bails him out a little bit, because Simmons is in like a whole different level of that shooting, process and just trying to get it down at all. But what's Giannis's growth been like from a shooting perspective? I know you wrote a little bit about that in the book too.
Well, if you look at rookie year, it was not an ugly shot. It was very fluid. It did not look bad at all.
That's what I'm wondering. I'm like, who taught him to do this?
So rookie year, he actually attempted quite a number of threes. So it was not like this was like this awful glaring gap in his game. It wasn't even talked about that as far as the draft either. They were just like, it just wasn't labeled as this glaring weakness as it is now, because it wasn't at the time. And then so Larry Drew gets fired, and then Jason Kidd comes in, and Jason's like, I don't want you to shoot, at least not for the first couple of years. So he didn't let him shoot. And he would, some of the gems in the book as far as like basketball stuff is, Jason Kidd would bench him if he took a long distance shot. So imagine like not being able to do this for a couple of years. It's going to mess with your confidence. It's going to mess with your timing. It's going to mess with like your ability to like, just your muscle memory. You haven't done it. You have a split second between open and release. And he just didn't have that for a couple of years. And I think that really like screwed him up in certain ways. Josh Oppenheimer, who I mentioned earlier, worked with him rookie year on the shot. And Josh is known for shooting. And then he's, really just doesn't have a whole lot to do with it after that, because Jason Kidd, wants it his way, and that's the type of coach Jason Kidd is. And it's just like, I think it just morphed into something that just wasn't a part of his game, and then they want it to be part of his game, and then they want him to be a perimeter person, and all of a sudden he doesn't know how, and emphasizing that instead of going to the basket, which he should do every single time, because there's nobody that can defend him when he goes inside. So I think Bud, emphasizing like, it's analytics. We want you to take these, other shots, is just kind of like, I feel like does a disservice to his powers.
Yeah, I really hope he breaks through and wins it all here. I'm rooting for them, and everybody's got a take on how he should play, what he needs to do. I think one of my favorite things is Barack Obama was on a podcast with Bill Simmons and was like, he needs to develop a mid-range. You're like, everybody's got an opinion on this.
I know.
So how are you, last question here, and Mirin Fader's Giannis, the improbable rise of a NBA MVP, is out August 10th. I have pre-ordered it. You can too. Go out there and get it. How are you absorbing this playoff run as we go along here? Game 1 was last night as we record this. They lost, but a long series ahead with Atlanta. Really feels like they're probably the favorite to win it all at this point, with Kawhi down and Chris Paul in that COVID protocol. Someone tweeted you saying, like, is there going to be like a playoff chapter that you have to write here for the soft cover edition? Like, how are you following this playoff run, and how are you working through it right now?
Oh my God, I'm sitting there stressed. Bucks fans, I see you. I understand it now. Books don't sell themselves. So essentially, like, if the Bucks do well, that'll really help me, which is nice. But so I'm just studying them. I know I'm going to have to write something for the paperback version. And the Hawks are for real though. Everyone was like, okay, the Bucks are going to take this, but I mean, they're good and they're fun. The Hawks, you know, they're not to be taken lightly. And the Bucks just look super uninspiring. I was just like getting very angry yesterday. Like, can you guys play with more heart? Come on, you know? And they just, I don't know. There's just no urgency, like no closing out, you know, not playing defense, not rotating, and just jacking up threes. And just it's annoying.
They're frustrating.
It's frustrating.
I had like a checklist in my head because when they went to the overtime in that game 7, I was like, they're gonna lose. The way they collapsed down the stretch there, and Brooke Lopez holding in the corner, I was just like, oh, they blew it. But that's been this playoff.
I was like, Brooke, for the love of God, I thought it was over. I was just so frustrated. But
I love all those guys, though. Brooke, love him. You know, beating Brooklyn back where he played for so long. Drew Holiday, awesome guy. Chris Middleton, one of my favorite players in the league. But it just isn't coming together for some reason.
I mean, part of it's coaching for sure, but also it's just I don't understand the lack of urgency, because it's like, you're the Bucks. You're never supposed to make it. You're never supposed to get your opportunity, and now you do. And this is the effort. You know, it's just very surprising. But like you said, there's so much talent. Like Chris Middleton is awesome. Like he really is. And like when Drew gets his rhythm, he's awesome too. But yeah, it's decision making. Yeah, I don't know. Here's to a better game, because recounting it, I'm getting all over again.
Trae Young's gonna need a biography one day. I mean, this is
amazing.
The shimmy. It was so great. These playoffs have been amazing. They really have. These are the best I can remember.
Why is everyone complaining? It's wonderful.
I don't know. We gotta stay off Twitter, me and you, and just enjoy the game. I don't get. There's just so much negativity on there around the league, and it's like, listen, who cares about the ratings? Who cares about how Adam Silver and the business people care about this? Like, this is just really good basketball, and we can all sense that. We can all feel it. It's a little unfamiliar, for sure. You know, LeBron's tweeting about well, I told you guys, now I'm not in the playoffs anymore. It's like, we'll be fine. We got Devin Booker. We got Giannis. We got Paul George. But again, at the same time, this is a bunch of people who haven't broken through. Paul, Giannis, George, you know, on the Hawks side. They're younger. There's not the expectations there. But someone's going to break through here and finally going to get beloved and get their flowers. And hopefully it'll be Giannis. But Mirin Fader, thanks so much for being here. Awesome talking to you. Thank you for all the advice you've given me early in my career here. I was in the that competition last April. I think it's talking about quarantine memories, where we had to write the obituary and the.
Dude, congrats for getting through that.
My favorite was I got to write about an Italian sub. I think one of the topics was write about food. It was some fun topics there.
You killed it. You killed it. Well,
thank you.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun, and we'll have to do it soon. You know, hopefully if the Bucks get their act together. I appreciate you having me.
We'll do it. Can't wait to read the book. I'm still getting through Jeff's Lakers book right now. Anything good you're reading right now?
Oh my God. This is, as you can see, I love books. But when somebody's like, what's your favorite book, or what are you reading? I'm just like, books. I think it's called Of Salt and Women. By Gabriela Garcia. I just started that. I might be butchering the title, but it's really, really good. So yeah, I'm a total book nerd. But if anybody has ideas for book number 2, let me know.
Hey, I'll send some your way myself. Thank you, Mirin. Thanks for being here on Dome Theory, and we will talk to you again here on the show soon.
Great. Thank you.